Your great-grandmother's medicine cabinet would get her arrested today. Not metaphorically, literally. The plants, roots, and tinctures American pioneers carried in their wagons across the frontier. The ones that kept their children alive through winters without antibiotics, through wounds without surgery, through fevers without hospitals. Most of them are now restricted, regulated, or quietly pushed out of mainstream medicine. 20 of them in particular. 20 banned frontier medicines that your doctor today would never prescribe, never recommend, and in some cases would actively warn you against using. I am Dr. Liana. I spent 15 years in emergency medicine before I started asking a question that changed everything for me. Why did the medicine that kept an entire continent alive for 200 years suddenly become too dangerous for us? The answer is not what you have been told. These plants did not stop working. They did not become poisonous overnight. They did not fail the science. They simply became unprofitable. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through each of the 20. What the pioneers used it for, what the science has quietly confirmed, and exactly why it disappeared from your pharmacy. And there is one in particular I need to get to. Because what happened to that plant in 1960 is one of the most documented cases of commercial suppression in American medical history. By the way, thousands of people over 45 have decided that "you're just getting older" is not an acceptable medical answer. They're inside the green vault. The protocols their doctors don't have time to prescribe, because the system rewards prescriptions, not healing, are in the link in the description. Anyway, let me begin with number 1, willow bark. Long before aspirin existed, every pioneer homestead had a strip of willow bark drying in the pantry. When a fever came, when a tooth ached, when a back seized up after a day behind the plow, you chewed a piece of willow bark or boiled it into tea. The active compound is salicin. Your liver converts it into salicylic acid. That is the exact chemistry that inspired the synthetic aspirin patented by Bayer in 1897. The pioneers had the original. We were given the copy. Willow bark is not illegal, but under modern regulations, it cannot be marketed for pain relief without specific approval. Try telling a physician you treated a fever with willow bark tea and watch the note they write in your chart. Number 2, lobelia inflata, Indian tobacco. The eclectic physicians of the 1800s considered it the single most valuable plant in the American materia medica. They used it for asthma attacks, for bronchitis, for stubborn congestion that suffocated children in the winter months. Samuel Thompson, the father of American herbal medicine, was tried for murder for prescribing it, and acquitted in the early 1800s. The case set a legal precedent for herbal practice in the United States. Today, lobelia is considered a restricted substance in several states. You will not find it on the shelf of any pharmacy. The pharmaceutical bronchodilators that replaced it generate over $30 billion per year globally. Let me show you what is really happening. At some point in the last few years, you left a medical appointment with a new prescription, and the feeling that you weren't heard. That wasn't an impression. That was the system. 7 minutes per consultation. In that time, sleep, nutrition, herbs, preventive protocols, root causes, none of that fits. A prescription fits. Nearly 40% of Americans over 65 take 5 or more medications simultaneously. Doctors have a name for it: polypharmacy, a disease caused by medicine itself. The pharmaceutical industry generates over $500 billion annually in the United States. With chronically sick people, not with healthy ones. There is another path. It has existed for generations in traditional and integrative medicine. Specialists with decades of clinical practice have documented exact protocols: plant, dose, timing, combinations, contraindications, drug interactions, for the 8 most common problems in people over 45: sleep, pain, blood sugar, kidneys, liver, hormones, immunity, metabolism, over 50 guides, verifiable sources, growing community of members, new protocols every month for less than the cost of 1 hour with a private specialist per year. Link in the description or scan the code on screen. Continuing. Number 3, goldenseal, Hydrastis canadensis. The Cherokee used its bright yellow root for every infection you can imagine: skin, eyes, mouth, stomach. The pioneers adopted it immediately. By the 1880s, it was the most prescribed herbal remedy in North America. Its active compound, berberine, has been studied in more than 2,000 published papers. It works against bacteria, against fungi, against parasites, against the low-grade inflammation behind metabolic disease. Goldenseal is now listed as a threatened species because of overharvesting, and strict regulations limit its commercial sale. Most of what you find online is adulterated, underpowered, or mislabeled. Number 4, echinacea. The Lakota and the Cheyenne used 3 different species long before a single European stepped on the plains: snake bites, wounds, fevers, sore throats. They called it the toothache plant because holding a fresh root against an abscess numbed the pain and drew out the infection. By 1930, Echinacea was the most prescribed immune remedy in American medicine. Then the antibiotic revolution arrived in the 1940s, and everything herbal was relabeled folklore. Modern research has confirmed that specific compounds in echinacea, alkylamides and polysaccharides, measurably stimulate white blood cell activity. Your doctor will not say a word about this. It is not in the guidelines. One more thing, your doctor isn't wrong. They're trapped in a system that has 7 minutes per patient and profits from prescriptions, not from healing. You don't need a different doctor. You need the protocol they don't have time to give you. Greenvault, link in the description. Continuing. Number 5, yarrow. Achillea millefolium, named after the Greek hero Achilles, who supposedly carried it into battle to stop his soldiers bleeding. By the time the pioneers were moving west, every homestead had a patch of yarrow growing near the door. You crushed the leaves and applied them directly to a cut or a gash. The bleeding stopped within minutes. Pioneer journals documented this across 1,000 diaries. Modern science has isolated at least 12 active compounds responsible for this effect, including acylene, a genuine coagulant. The last American Pharmacopeia to officially list yarrow was 1955. Number 6, boneset, Eupatorium perfoliatum. The name came from pioneer families describing the terrible muscle and bone aches of influenza, an ache so deep it felt like your bones were breaking. Boneset tea was the answer. Hot, bitter, and effective. The Eclectic medical schools kept boneset on the official list until they were dismantled by the Flexner Report of 1910. That report, funded by the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations, eliminated every medical school in America that taught herbal medicine. Within 20 years, boneset had been erased from the curriculum. Today, it grows wild across half the country and almost no one knows what it is. Number 7, elderberry, Sambucus nigra. Hippocrates called it his medicine chest. The pioneers made syrup from the dark purple berries and kept jars of it for the winter. A spoonful at the first sign of a cough was standard. A 1995 Israeli clinical trial showed that elderberry extract cut the duration of influenza in half. That study has been replicated multiple times since. The syrup is legal, but doctors are prohibited from recommending it as an alternative to antiviral medication. There is no code, no reimbursement, and no training pathway. Number 8, slippery elm bark, Ulmus rubra. The inner bark was scraped, dried, and powdered. Mixed with hot water, it formed a thick, soothing mucilage. Pioneer mothers gave it to infants with colic, to elders with ulcers, to anyone with a burned throat or a raging cough. 200 years of unbroken clinical experience across the American continent. Then, in the 1970s, the United States Food and Drug Administration quietly removed slippery elm from the generally recognized as safe category for therapeutic claims. Not because it was harmful, because no company filed the paperwork to defend it. Number 9, sassafras, Sassafras albidum. The original root beer was sassafras tea. It was the first commercial export from the American colonies back to Europe. For 2 centuries, a cup of sassafras in the spring was the standard American tonic. In 1960, the Food and Drug Administration banned sassafras as a food additive because the compound safrole showed carcinogenic potential in a study on rats, given massive doses for life. Low dose, short term, brewed as a traditional tea, sassafras has no documented harm in 200 years of pioneer use. But the ban remains. You cannot buy sassafras beverages in any American grocery store. Number 10, comfrey, Symphytum officinale knitbone. That was the pioneer nickname because it was believed to knit broken bones and torn flesh. Applied as a poultice to sprains, fractures, wounds, and ulcers, comfrey produced results so consistent that every farm had a patch of it. The active compound is allantoin, a cell proliferant that genuinely accelerates tissue repair. This has been verified repeatedly in modern dermatology research. Comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids that can damage the liver when taken internally in large amounts over long periods. The Food and Drug Administration removed oral comfrey products from the market in 2001. Topical use remains legal, but quietly discouraged. Number 11, mullein, Verbascum thapsus. The soft velvet leaves were dried and smoked or brewed into a tea for any respiratory condition you can name. Asthma, bronchitis, whooping cough, pneumonia recovery. Pioneer children with croup slept with a cup of mullein tea on the nightstand. The clinical literature confirms 2 active compounds, verbascicide and aucubin, that reduce inflammation in the airways and relieve spasm. You will not find this in any medical textbook written after 1960. Number 12, valerian, Valeriana officinalis. The pioneer remedy for sleepless nights, frayed nerves, and what they called brain fag, what we now call anxiety and burnout. The root has a strong odor that some people find offensive, but the effect on the central nervous system is measurable and well documented. Modern sleeping pill sales in the United States exceed $17 billion per year. A jar of valerian root costs less than $10 and lasts for months. You can guess which option your doctor is trained to recommend. Number 13, black cohosh, Actea racemosa. The Cherokee gave it to women in every stage of life. Painful menstruation, difficult childbirth, the hot flashes and night sweats of the change of life. The plant was included in the official United States Pharmacopeia from 1820 to 1936. Controlled studies in Germany and the United States have confirmed its effectiveness for menopausal symptoms at rates comparable to low-dose hormone therapy. Your gynecologist has likely never mentioned it. Number 14, wild lettuce, Lactuca virosa. When pioneers could not get opium, which was legal and standard at the time, they turned to wild lettuce. The milky sap contains compounds that produce genuine pain relief and sedation without the addictive properties of the poppy. In the 1970s, wild lettuce enjoyed a brief revival when true opium became restricted. The Food and Drug Administration responded by warning against its use. It is still legal to grow, but you will never see it recommended for pain management. Number 15, sassafras, Sassafras albidum. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning. The original root beer was sassafras tea. It was the first commercial export from the American colonies back to Europe. For 2 centuries, a cup of sassafras in the spring was the standard American tonic, used to thin the blood after a long winter of heavy food. In 1960, the Food and Drug Administration banned sassafras as a food additive because the compound safrole showed carcinogenic potential in a study on rats given massive doses for life. Low dose, short term, brewed as a traditional tea, sassafras has no documented harm in 300 years of pioneer and colonial use. But the ban remains. You cannot legally buy sassafras beverages in any American grocery store today. Number 16, calendula, Calendula officinalis, the bright orange flower that grew in every pioneer garden. The petals were dried, infused in oil, and applied to burns, scrapes, rashes, and skin infections. Midwives used it on cracked nipples and diaper rash. Modern European hospitals still use calendula ointment for radiation burns after cancer treatment. American hospitals use pharmaceutical creams that cost 50 times more. Number 17, plantain, Plantago major. Not the banana, the low, broad-leafed weed that grows in every lawn in America. The pioneers called it white man's foot because it followed the settlers everywhere they went. Chewed into a paste and applied to a bee sting, a spider bite, a splinter, or an infected wound, plantain draws out the toxin and accelerates healing. Every pioneer child knew how to use it by the age of 5. Today, almost no American adult recognizes the plant. Number 18, horehound, Marubium vulgar. The original cough drop. Pioneer women boiled horehound with honey into a thick, bitter syrup that cut through the worst chest congestion in a single dose. Horehound was removed from the Food and Drug Administration's generally recognized as safe list for cough preparations in 1989. Not because it did not work, because no company stepped forward to fund the testing required to keep it on the list. Number 19, skullcap, Scutellaria lateriflora. The Eclectic physicians prescribed it for nervous exhaustion, insomnia tied to overthinking, and the tremors that follow severe stress. Pioneer journals called it a brain tonic, one of the few plants believed to rebuild the nerves themselves. Recent neurochemistry research has identified specific flavonoids in skullcap that bind to the same brain receptors as pharmaceutical anti-anxiety medications, without the dependence, without the withdrawal. Number 20, black walnut hull, Juglans nigra. The green outer shell of the walnut, the part you throw away before eating the nut, was the pioneer remedy for intestinal parasites, fungal infections, and stubborn skin conditions. Every farm child in 19th century America was treated with black walnut tincture at least once a year as a preventive measure. Parasites were common. The remedy was free. It came from the same tree that gave them wood, food, and dye. In modern medicine, parasite treatment requires prescription medication and a laboratory-confirmed diagnosis. The test itself often fails to detect low-level infections, leaving patients treated with antibiotics that do nothing or suffering unexplained symptoms for years. Black walnut hull tincture still works. It is still legal, and almost no physician under 50 knows what it is. That is the 20. 20 remedies that raised a dozen generations of Americans. 20 medicines that your doctor today cannot prescribe, will not recommend, and in several cases has been trained to warn you against, not because they stopped working, because they stopped generating revenue. Before I close, a word of honesty. You cannot walk into a field tomorrow, pick a handful of plants, and treat a serious condition. The pioneers didn't either. They learned from their mothers, from the midwife, from the eclectic physicians who trained for 6 years in schools that have since been shuttered. Species, part of the plant, harvest season, preparation, dose, interactions. That knowledge is the difference between medicine and poison, and almost none of it is taught to physicians today. This knowledge did not disappear. It was suppressed, ignored. deliberately removed from medical schools by the Flexner Report of 1910, replaced by synthetic compounds that could be patented, priced, and prescribed. But it lives in monographs, in old pharmacy texts, in oral tradition, and in the carefully documented protocols of practitioners who refuse to let it die. If this video made a difference, subscribe and share it with someone who needs this knowledge. Every share keeps alive what the industry wanted forgotten. The next video opens a new chapter. The 3 ancestral breakfast foods that modern doctors replaced with the most inflammatory meal pattern in human history, and what your great-grandparents ate every morning without a single chronic disease in sight. Subscribe so you don't miss it. One final reminder before you go. Everything I have shared today is for educational purposes only. These remedies have contraindications, drug interactions, and specific conditions where they should not be used. Pregnancy, nursing, chronic disease, and prescription medications all change the picture. Always consult a qualified healthcare practitioner before using any of these plants. The point is not to replace your doctor. The point is to know what has been hidden from the conversation. Think about this for a moment. Our great-grandparents lived through the flu pandemic of 1918, through the Great Depression, through winters without central heating and summers without refrigeration. They raised 8 children on a farm with no hospital for 40 miles. They did it with the 20 plants on this list, and about 50 more I did not have time to cover tonight. Not all of them survived. Medicine had limits then. It has limits now, but they had something we lost. They had a relationship with the landscape. They knew the plants around them the way you know the apps on your phone, and when trouble came, they did not wait to be rescued. They reached for what they knew. The pioneers did not have insurance. They did not have pharmacies. They had a garden, a forest, and 200 years of passed down knowledge about what grew there. The same can be true for you. This knowledge doesn't belong to the industry. It belongs to you. Subscribe to Green Vault so no one forgets it.